Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you've just found this place, then welcome. And if you're returning, I am glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theorycraft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. Today we are returning with one of our requested builds, and today's build comes from TC Fightwell, who asked to see the best cleric build without cleric levels. So of course I am calling this build the totally not a cleric character, aka the priest. Now you may be asking yourself, what exactly is the difference between a cleric and a priest? Traditionally, the D&D cleric has always been a heavily armored full caster who's meant to be very versatile and capable of being that backline support, but also capable of actually tanking a bit and possibly carrying the team. The priest class, on the other hand, namely from an MMORPG such as World of Warcraft, is more of a full backline caster support class. Now, of course, since we're trying to build essentially a cleric without actually taking any cleric levels, I do want to draw a bit of inspiration from that priest role and push us into more of a support direction. But really, we have to think about when we say build the best cleric without cleric levels, what does that exactly mean? Is that all we're going for, the support role and capability to heal our allies, dish out buffs, and maybe deal some damage while sitting comfortably at the back line the entire time? Or do we mean create the best cleric as in a complete one-to-one or as close to one-to-one recreation of what a cleric can do in D&D? Meaning making a character that is able to be heavily armored if they so choose, have a wide access to a range of domains in order to emphasize that versatility. Doesn't mean we need to get channel divinity somehow in order to feel like we can have this signature cleric ability, while also getting access to the cleric spell list in order to cast proper cleric spells. These were all things that I wanted to consider before jumping into the build. And before I get ahead of myself, as I'm sure some of you may be guessing already, yes, we will at some point be taking Divine Soul Sorcerer. Even though this is primarily a 2024 build, backwards compatibility and all that, we are allowed to pick it up. For those that don't know, Divine Soul Sorcerer is a sorcerer subclass that gets access to the full cleric spell list. That makes them the prime candidate for creating a cleric without actually taking any cleric levels. Now the other thing is that we're not just going with Divine Soul Sorcerer, because I did want to have a couple other features added on to make us feel like a proper cleric. I'm also going to be trying to get heavy armor proficiency, though whether we actually wear that heavy armor or not is going to be up to you. I also am going to try and get channel divinity on this build, since channel divinity is such a core cleric feature in D&D, and even though you don't necessarily need it to be a support character, it feels appropriate for a character that is trying to mimic being a cleric. Finally, the one main thing is that, as I have said already, we are primarily using 2024 rules for this build, though technically a lot of the stuff we're taking is going to be backwards compatible from 2014, so if you wanted to do this build using the older rules or the newer rules, it can be pretty versatile and fit in either set. With all that said, let's jump into the build. Starting off the build in character creation with our origin, for our species we are going to pick human. This is just my own personal preference because I like the extra origin feat they get right away, but honestly, you could pick any species you want and make it work, since any species should work on this type of challenge build. For our background, as much as I wish we could say that we just want to pick Acolyte straight out of the 2024 Player's Handbook, unfortunately, we would like a boost to strength, which Acolyte does not give us. Pick a background from a previous source book from the 2014 rules, or make a custom background following the DMG rules, so that way we can get the origin feat of our choice, as well as the stat boosts that we want. Now, as far as the stat boosts go, we do want a +1 to strength, but then we want a +2 to charisma. Acolyte, as perfect as it would be for capturing this cleric who is not actually a cleric, unfortunately only gives us access to intelligence, wisdom, or charisma to boost right off the bat. We had to take the special origin to get a +2 to charisma and a +1 to strength. The origin feat, though, is, to no surprise, Magic Initiate Cleric. This way we can have access to one cleric spell that we can also cast once for free per day, right off the bat, and we gain 2 cleric cantrips. This is the perfect place to start our priest build by getting access to a portion of the cleric spell list without actually touching the class itself. For our human origin feat, we are also going to probably want to pick up either the healer feat in order to genuinely be a good support and healer, getting to reroll 1s on any spell we cast that does restore hit points, or we could take the skilled feat. The skilled feat is not so that we can become a skill monkey, but rather so that we can actually pick up more skills that would be typical of what a cleric might have, but that our classes that we pick aren't going to get access to. Finally, as far as those stats go, we're going to want the following array of ability scores. We want 14 strength, 10 dexterity, 14 constitution, 8 intelligence, 12 wisdom, and 17 charisma. Starting off the build at level 1, we are going to look at each tier of play. So looking at tier 1 is going to be levels 1 to 5, tier 2 is going to be levels 6 to 10, so on and so forth. In tier 1, levels 1 to 5, we are going to be a paladin 3 and sorcerer 2. Now, neither of these are probably a big surprise. I said we wanted to be a divine soul sorcerer, so of course that's where the sorcerer levels come in. And we want channel divinity, as I said as well, and paladin is the only other class besides cleric to get access to that. Now, what may be a surprise is the fact that we are going to want to start off as a paladin. This way we can gain that heavy armor proficiency that we want, and we can march our way up to level 3 in order to gain channel divinity as quick as possible. So with that said, we'll grab a shield, put our holy symbol on it, and grab a suit of chainmail. We don't have the strength to wear plate mail, but we're not worried about that just yet, since we really can't get it at level 1 anyways. Paladin 2 and 3 are going to give us quite a bit. Paladin 2 gives us Blessed Warrior, so we can pick up an extra cleric cantrip if we didn't want a traditional fighting style feat. And for this, as well as your magic initiate cleric cantrips, you could pick up a damage cantrip if you want, but we also might want to consider support cantrips so we can have that support role filled out a bit more. And because we're going to be swapping all of these cantrips to support based ones such as guidance or spare the dying later, no matter what, we're going to get a better source for damaging cleric cantrips later on in the build. Going up to level 3 Paladin, we gain our Channel Divinity. Since 2024 Paladins now get Channel Divinity at level 3, they get the basic one, which is essentially Divine Sense, but we also gain our subclass specific one, and we also have more uses of it than a 2014 Paladin would. We start off with 2 uses right away, and will actually gain more as we level up. Now, as far as your Channel Divinity goes, I'm going to say it's up to you, because I think this character is best utilized when you let your subclass of Paladin reflect the divine domain that your cleric that you're trying to emulate would take. This could be like taking the Ancient's Paladin in order to reflect the nature domain, or taking the Oath of Glory or Oath of Devotion in order to reflect the light or life domains. If, however, you did want a suggestion, I actually do have one up my sleeve. If I had to recommend one Channel Divinity in particular, it would be Vow of Enmity for us. Vow of Enmity has had some big changes in 2024. It now says, when we take the attack action, we can utter our Vow of Enmity and expend our Channel Divinity use to mark a target within 30 feet of ourselves. We then have advantage on all attack rolls against that target for the next minute. If we choose to use the Channel Divinity a second time, it will of course end early on the first target, but if the enemy drops to 0 before that minute has expired, we can actually transfer the Vow of Enmity to a new creature with no action being required on our part. That alone is really awesome. However, the other thing that's awesome is the fact that this Vow of Enmity works with a full caster. It says we need to take the attack action to place the vow. It doesn't actually say we need to use the attack action to trigger the advantage on our attack rolls. Once we have the vow placed, we just have advantage on all attack rolls for the next minute, including spell attack rolls. Nor do we even need to place the vow on the target we are attacking. We could, for example, take the attack action, shove or grapple an ally of ours for whatever reason, maybe to help them with positioning or something, and then mark a different target within 30 feet of us. or we could walk up to that enemy that is within 30 feet of us, take the attack action, smack them, and place the vow all in one. All your attack rolls, including the spell attack rolls that we're going to definitely be grabbing once we hit Sorcerer 1, are going to be made with advantage. Speaking of Sorcerer 1, after we have gotten to Paladin 3, we jump over to Sorcerer as well as Sorcerer 2, and from here we gain Innate Sorcery at Sorcerer 1, as well as Font of Magic and Meta Magic at Sorcerer 2. For our Meta Magic options, you can pick your favorites. I would highly recommend both Quicken Spell and Twinned Spell. The real feature we care about is Innate Sorcery. That gives us advantage on all our Sorcerer spell attacks, as well as increases the save DC for our Sorcerer spells specifically. So since we have made it to Sorcerer, it's time to grab all those good blasting cantrips and blaster spells and use those primarily in combat, while taking the opportunity to start to swap over our Cleric cantrips that we got from Magic Initiate Cleric and Blessed Warrior to more support-based cantrips. The other big thing to note is that because Innate Sorcery only affects Sorcerer spells, it will not affect our Cleric cantrips yet. Tier 2 is where things are really going to start to take off for us. At level 6, we are going to become a Divine Soul Sorcerer by picking that as our subclass at level 3, and now we have access to the full Cleric spell list. This means that if you had Cleric cantrips that dealt damage before, get rid of those ones from your other features and pick them up as a Divine Soul Sorcerer, because they now count as Sorcerer spells, meaning they mesh with Innate Sorcery for us. Or forego the Cleric damage cantrips completely and instead grab the Sorcerer blasting cantrips in order to make use of Vow of Enmity and Innate Sorcery. Both those features providing advantage on all our spellcast attack rolls really make them both feel like the same type of Channel Divinity feature. Also, right away at level 3, when we become a Divine Soul Sorcerer, we can pick the affinity that our Divine Blood is from. Whether you actually want to keep that Divine Soul lore or reflavor it to be more of the domain that you're serving, the choice is totally up to you, but we do have a few options for an extra spell that we can get and just know permanently. No need to prepare it. The other thing we get is Favored by the Gods. Favored by the Gods says that if we fail a saving throw or miss with an attack roll, we can roll 2d4, adding the number rolled to the total, potentially changing that fail or miss into a success. This feature can be used once per short or long rest, and really is almost word for word the Epic Boon of Fate. The only difference is that the Epic Boon of Fate can be used on a teammate, whereas this is specifically for us. Getting that right away at level 3 is phenomenal. Going up to level 7, aka Sorcerer 4, we gain our first feat. For this, we're taking the Warcaster feat because it feels really appropriate for a Cleric type character. We want to have that advantage on our concentration saving throws, so we get the ability score improvement, which is also great, and we can cast an attack spell with our reaction instead of an opportunity attack. That's a really nice bonus as well, since if we're attacking our Vow of Enmity, it's going to be made with advantage, or Innate Sorcery. If we use a Sorcerer cantrip, it also has advantage from that as well. Going up to level 8 or Sorcerer 5, we gain 3rd level Sorcerer spells, and here you might have a complete change of faith, convert to the Light Domain, and pick up Fireball, or you could pick up any other 3rd level spells that you would feel reflect the domain that you're trying to emulate. Following this, we can go up to level 9, aka Sorcerer 6, and there we gain Empowered Healing. Empowered Healing says that whenever we or an ally within 5 feet of us roll dice to determine how much hit points a spell can restore, we can spend a sorcery point to reroll any number of those dice. If you've paired that with the Healer feat, we have some really strong healing, being able to reroll ones for free or any number of dice at the cost of 1 sorcerer point. Going up to tier 3, there's not much to say here since we're just continuing up with our sorcerer levels. For what it's worth, we're going to get all the way up to sorcerer 12, so we'll gain more meta magics, other base sorcerer features, no other subclass features yet, and we will also gain 2 feats. These feats are a little less rigid in what we need to take, since we already kind of do feel like a cleric without any cleric levels, so we can just pump up that flavor a little bit more, or get a little bit more mechanically powerful if you wanted to focus more on combat. For some fun feats, I would suggest either skill expert or actor of all things, in order to be able to increase our charisma, hopefully capping it if it's not capped already, while also making us more skilled at being a cleric. Actor in particular would allow us to have advantage if we're trying to legitimately impersonate a cleric without actually being one. For more combat-oriented feats, Mage Slayer is definitely a favorite of mine, as it gives you that mini legendary resistance on any mental saving throw, as well as allowing us to pump up our strength to finally be able to wear plate mail, giving us a 15 strength, and we also can cause an enemy to have disadvantage on their concentration saves, making us a really good anti-mage whenever we damage them. Mage Slayer just cares about dealing damage, so if we did want to emulate that Cleric of the Light domain, hucking fireballs, and we hit a whole group of spellcasters, they're all going to have disadvantage on those concentration saves with Mage Slayer. That could be pretty fun too. Finally, at tier 4, levels 16 to 20, we are going to be a Paladin 3 asterisk and Sorcerer 17 asterisk. If we go 3 and 17, which is what I would highly recommend, we can gain access to the 9th level spells, specifically 9th level cleric spells, since we have the full class spell list as a Divine Soul Sorcerer. This personally is the way I would want to go, because really, how can we call ourselves a cleric without cleric levels if we don't try to pick up those 9th level cleric spells? On the other hand though, if you really didn't care about a 9th level spell and still knew you were going to reach level 20, level 4 Paladin and level 16 Sorcerer would get you 2 epic boons, of which there are actually 2 that I really would recommend on this character. Boon of Fate, like I said, is essentially just our Favored by the Gods feature that we got at level 3 from becoming a Divine Soul Sorcerer. And the really fun part about this one is we can actually stack them together. If we fail a very crucial saving throw or miss with a very crucial attack roll, we can add 4d4 to that roll. Or, you could spend it on a teammate if you really wanted to be friendly. The other epic boon would be Boon of Recovery, because the Divine Soul Capstone, Unearthly Recovery, is almost the exact same thing as this epic boon. Unearthly Recovery says that as a bonus action, if we're below half health, we can regain a number of hit points equal to half our hit point maximum, so shoot back up to almost full. Whereas the Boon of Recovery triggers only when we drop to 0, we get set to 1 instead, and then go back up to half our hit point maximum. We also would gain a pool of separate healing that we could add on. No matter the option, they're both fairly good choices, but the other exciting thing we get just from being a Sorcerer 14, so we're going to pick it up no matter what split we choose, is Angelic Form. Use a bonus action to get a pair of angel wings that last until we are incapacitated, and we have a flying speed of 30 feet. This kind of feels more cleric-y than an actual cleric does, given that only a few of them ever actually gain flying speeds, and they're never really flavored as wings in the actual subclass feature themselves. This is straight up a divine gift. Besides that, that's the build. Overall, we do feel like a very priestly figure. We have Channel Divinity, we have access to the full cleric spell list, and we have heavy armor proficiency if that is something you want. You could run this build as more of a lighter armored build if you so chose, but I definitely wanted to have the option for heavy armor, since some clerics do have that option as well. One thing I would be remiss if I did not mention is our feats. I gave a bunch of suggestions about what feats we could take throughout the build. However, all of these should probably have an asterisk next to them, as I think one thing you could do that could be a little bit more fun from a flavor perspective is to pick feats that would fit in the domain that you are trying to emulate for your cleric. For example, if we wanted to emulate a Sharon type cleric from the Trickery, Twilight, or maybe even Death domain, we could pick up feats like Skulker and Shadow Touched, which help us get that darkness flavor going. It's not going to be one-to-one for the exact same things that the features those subclass gets us do, but from a flavor perspective, it would be pretty close. All the feats on this build, including the epic boons, if you take 2 or even if you just pick up 1, can all be put to great effective use for really fleshing out the divine domain that this character is meant to worship, whether just as an act or as a genuine priest-like character that isn't a cleric. Let me know what you thought of the build though, or what you would add or change to get closer to this concept of a cleric without taking any actual cleric levels. And as always, thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.